All right, welcome everyone to our final week of the class. This is week 8, so you have survived public budgeting and finance. For this week, the only task we really have on our agenda is to complete the critical assignment and to submit that critical assignment. As you already know, because I know you've been working on this for a while, the critical assignment is there to try and pull together a lot of the major salient elements of the class and allow you to then apply them in a practical nature to put together a budget. So just to recap very quickly to make sure everyone knows what we're doing, you've been working on this for a while now, but you'll be working in part 1. This consists of 2 parts, and so in part 1 you'll be working on using the exercise that I provided for you, the Huddleston exercise, and putting together a consolidated library budget. That consolidated library budget is based upon a scenario where you are the deputy budget director. You've been charged with consolidating the library budgets again into one consolidated budget. But in doing so, you are also required to adhere to all the parameters that are laid out in the scenario. So to recap, those parameters are, as you create your consolidated budget, all existing branch libraries must remain open. You are not allowed to close any of the branch libraries. 2, the county's agreement with municipalities requires that the new consolidated budget must be 3% less than the aggregate of the existing branch budgets. You can cut more than 3% if you want. I would caution you of cutting way too much, because then I'll ask the question, why did you cut so much? Is this going to then be detrimental to the functions of the county library? But you need to cut at least 3% from the existing budget. So again, the first thing you want to do, add up all the branch budgets, come up with your total for the aggregate of all the branches, subtract 3% from that, and that becomes your target figure then that you will use in creating your consolidated budget. Number 3, no cuts will be made to any full-time employees. So hands off full-time employees, no cuts to positions, no cuts to hours. However, part-time employees may be cut. You can cut entire positions or you may cut hours for your part-time employees. That is all fair game. Number 4, the county's agreement with public employee unions requires that salary scales within job classifications are to be standardized at the highest levels currently paid by any of the newly consolidated units. This means that all employees in a position classification must be paid the highest salary currently paid by any branch for that classification. So after you have calculated your target figure for the amount that you can spend in your consolidated budget, you'll then want to go and scan each one of the library branches for each of the classifications to determine which branch is currently paying the highest for branch librarians, the highest for reference librarians, for assistant librarians. That then becomes a new salary standard. Then every employee within that classification must get paid that highest salary amount. The quick rule of thumb is that for all except one position, Waynesfield is the branch that pays the highest amount. But there is one position, one classification, where there's another smaller branch library that actually has the highest salary structure. But everything gets standardized to the highest amount currently paid. So you're basically going to end up giving a lot of people raises while at the same time cutting an overall 3% from the consolidated budget. Point number 5, all branch librarians designated head librarians, either full or part-time, will be designated branch librarians and compensated accordingly. This is true for all head librarians with the exception of the head librarian for the city of Waynesfield. So in your final consolidated budget, when you turn that in part 1, there should not be any designation of a classification called head librarian. There are no more head librarians. All the head librarians become branch librarians and then get paid the highest amount that a branch librarian is currently being paid, with the exception of the head librarian for Waynesfield. The head librarian for the city of Waynesfield will become the director of county libraries, which is a brand new position with a budgeted amount of $45,000 per year. So Waynesfield will have for Waynesfield, you have the director of county libraries, and then all the other head librarians then become branch librarians. So based upon those instructions and parameters, you are to prepare a consolidated budget that addresses each of these criteria established above. An Excel spreadsheet's been provided, and so you're working out that spreadsheet that I provided for you. All the formulas are in that spreadsheet, so all you have to do is change your numbers, and then the results will change automatically. Again, I did that just to create a level playing field based upon the knowledge that some people have really great Excel skills. Some people haven't used Excel much before, so it allows everyone to do the assignment and do well on the assignment regardless of their experience with Excel. So submission of part 1 will be the submission of that consolidated spreadsheet. So you put in that consolidated spreadsheet together. Once you complete your spreadsheet, then you complete part 2 of the assignment. Part 2 is a 5 to 7 page narrative analysis of the changes that you made to arrive at your consolidated budget. So what did you cut to get 3% out of that budget? Did you cut positions? Did you cut acquisitions? Did you cut supplies? Did you cut maintenance? What specifically did you cut? And discuss and defend why you made those cuts. So why were those cuts more effective or better than other potential cuts that you could have made? So in part 2, you're going to do this 5 to 7 page narrative. First, discuss and defend the reductions that you made to reduce the budget by 3%. Then secondly, in that narrative, I also want you to explain to me line item budgeting and the primary limitations of a line item budget compared to things like a performance budget, a program-based budget, and or a zero-based budget. Then number 3, third thing I'm asking you to do in that narrative is to recommend any additional revenue sources that the library system may consider to try and alleviate some of the cuts that you propose. Because obviously it's not ideal to have a 3% cut, even though that's not a huge cut in post-pandemic world, or current pandemic world, but you still there could be some additional revenue sources that you could find that might mitigate some of that cut. So instead of a 3% cut, maybe it could be a 1% cut or a 2% cut. So I want you to brainstorm some of those additional revenue sources that the library could think about trying to generate. So again, in this part 2, 5 to 7 page narrative, where you address those 3 things. Discuss and defend your cuts, explain line item budgeting, the limitations associated with it compared to other budgeting formats, and then number 3, recommend some additional revenue sources to alleviate your 3% cut. As you prepare part 2 of the assignment, I'm asking that you support your answers with relevant scholarly research. So you should incorporate at least 5 scholarly sources, peer-reviewed sources. So sources from places like Public Administration Review, Public Budgeting and Finance. Typically, I would assume that most of those sources will probably speak to the different budget formats and or they will speak to different advantages and disadvantages of revenue sources. I think that's probably where you're going to be able to incorporate those scholarly references. So kind of in points 2 and 3 in part 2 of the assignment. It would be very useful if you could upload both of the documents as one submission, and so you'll have your spreadsheet and then you'll have this 5 to 7 page narrative, both uploaded together as one submission in the critical assignment section. So I just wanted to review that assignment one last time as you are finishing up for this week. Again, as always, if you have any questions about the assignment, you run into any problems, feel free to send me an email. Otherwise, that will wrap it up for our class together. It's been a pleasure working with everyone. I hope that you got some good information out of a budgeting and finance course. I realize a lot of people do not look forward to taking budgeting and finance in the MPA program, but hopefully we've made the course as painless as it possibly could be while still providing you with some of the skills that you need if you run into the situation of having to analyze or even create a budget in the public or the nonprofit sectors. So it's been a pleasure. Any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Otherwise, enjoy your last week of the